Okay, it's 2:32 past 5. I think it's time to start. We have a very special guest today. I think we need to utilize this opportunity and not waste any minute. So, assalamu alaikum, bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Good evening, or maybe good morning, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to another session in our webinar series on digital learning and teaching in the age of AI, organized by the DLOE office, the Office for Digital Learning and Online Education here at Qatar University. I'm Nabil, Faculty Development and Digital Learning Specialist, and your host for this series. On behalf of the DLOE office, I would like to thank you for joining us this evening. This series brings together faculty and invited experts to examine how digital learning and artificial intelligence are shaping university teaching. Sometimes we focus on the big macro level of digital teaching in higher education, and other times the webinars are more focused on the micro, meso level of digital teaching and learning at the course or class level. Our aim is to explore emerging ideas, highlight practical strategies, and reflect on how we can design, teach, and assess student learning in ways that remain rigorous, engaging, ethical, and human-centered. Before we begin, a quick note that if you have questions at any point, please post them in the chat. We will address as many questions as we can during the Q&A part. And if you prefer to follow this session in Arabic or any other languages, you can turn on Arabic live captions in your Teams settings. My colleague Dana or Dr. Haifa will post screenshots in the chat to show you how you can do that. Turning now to today's topic. This session focuses on a question focusing on a question at the center of our work as educators. How do we prepare learners for a future shaped by artificial intelligence and constant change? Our guest speaker, Professor Chris Dede, will help us think about how learning and teaching must evolve in a world where people will move across multiple careers and where AI is shifting the balance between human judgment and machine-based prediction. His ideas on the 60-year curriculum and intelligence augmentation invite us to rethink our goals, assessments, and the capabilities our students need to thrive. It's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Professor Chris Dede. Professor Dede is a senior research fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and previously served for 22 years as the Timothy E. Worth Professor of Learning Technologies. He is a leading scholar in emerging technologies, learning innovation, and educational policy. He currently serves as co-principal investigator and associate director of research at the U.S. National AI Institute in adult learning and online education, and is a fellow of both the American Educational Research Association and the Online Learning Consortium. Many of you may also know him as the co-founder of Silver Lining for Learning webinar series, a global initiative on the future of education. With that, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Dede to lead us into this important conversation. Over to you, Dr. Chris.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to share ideas. And I'm looking forward to being able to hear your questions and comments on what I'm going to say. These ideas are big picture. So I'm going to look at the forest rather than the trees. I'm going to skim through a variety of things that all interlock with one another and try to give you an exciting glimpse of what lies ahead. A little bit about my background with AI. In addition to my current role with this National AI Institute, my interactions with AI in education began about 55 years ago in 1970 when the very first article on AI in education was published when I was a graduate student. And the author of that article confidently predicted that by the end of the 1970s, we wouldn't need teachers anymore. Obviously, that was not a good forecast. And I've lived through 9 hype cycles for AI since then. About every 5 years, AI makes some progress, and the optimists declare that we have digital deities, and the pessimists say that the Terminator is coming. And both of those extremes have been wrong in the last 9 hype cycles, and I'm going to argue that they're wrong in this hype cycle as well, that a more moderate view of what AI can accomplish makes sense. So you'll be hearing from me about a perspective that's not only balanced, but also from a historical understanding of the evolution of AI. So there's 2 themes that I want to discuss. One of them is new models of lifelong learning. We don't want to start with technology because we then have a solution looking for a problem, which is never a good thing. So we'll start with the issue of how we accomplish lifelong learning. And then I'll talk about how AI may be a piece of this. And in particular, given the limited time, I'll talk about IA, intelligence augmentation. So the 60-year curriculum is a term that comes out of continuing education, and it builds on a few things that are really changing lifelong learning and how important it is. People are living longer, so they're working longer in order to not run out of money when they retire. And we're living in a time that's very troubled globally for a variety of reasons. In the book that I co-edited in 2020 about the 60-year curriculum, we talked about climate change and failure to attain any of the UN sustainability goals and the impact of technologies like computer science and artificial intelligence that were changing the nature of work, and how all of these were driven very quickly into evolving because there now are billions of people that are connected by mobile devices with unprecedented processing power. Then, after the book was written, saying that we were living in a very disruptive time and people needed lifelong learning, first came the pandemic, then came generative AI, and now we see the rise of authoritarianism across the world. And all of those things are only intensifying what we said in the book about how disruptive this next period is going to be, not just for years, but for decades, and how we need all of us to continue learning throughout our lives in order to be able to handle the amount of change that's taking place. The pandemic was a nice example of this, actually, because the attributes that employers seek when they want to hire somebody has altered. Some things haven't altered: the ability to work as a team, having communication skills, having a work ethic, but problem-solving skills, even in low-level positions, leadership, initiative, these came out of the pandemic because the command and control model of running organizations collapsed under the pandemic, and people were left having to figure out what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. And so those traits of leadership and initiative and problem solving become really, really important at a time when we're undergoing so much disruption. And so the 60-year curriculum is really trying to prepare people for a turbulent world. The argument is that for the next couple of decades, the world will continue to be turbulent for many reasons. And that what we want is people that can thrive on chaos, not simply survive in turbulence and disruption, but actually find opportunities in turbulence and disruption, as some people did during the pandemic, and as some people are now during GenAI. So I don't have time to really go into more depth in the book, but these new models for lifelong learning don't simply talk about people keeping their knowledge and skills updated. They also require a lot of emphasis on beliefs and dispositions. The belief in yourself, that you have confidence, that you love learning, and dispositions like flexibility and resilience to handle the inevitable challenges that come along, a growth mindset that says you can keep growing and changing no matter what your age, and so on. So, how we prepare people for the future now is more complicated than it used to be because of where we are in history. Now, I've looked at different publications and reports about how to reconfigure education to meet this kind of a challenge. And some of the things I think are quite interesting, and we see them beginning to happen. Declaring a purpose rather than a role. My younger daughter, who is an engineer, her purpose was really to help marginalized groups through the kinds of advances that engineering could bring. But she couldn't declare a purpose in college. All that she could declare was a disciplinary major. And if you think about preparing for the purpose rather than preparing for a role, you see that we need to change how we frame the curriculum. Another kind of change that's frequent in the reports is looking at skill acquisition and competencies rather than just focusing on topics within the discipline. And again, we see now many digital tools developing based in part on AI that help you identify your own skills that come out of your life experiences as well as your academic preparation. And then that help you look at the idea that you'll have not just one career, but multiple careers. You're preparing yourself not just for your first job, not just for your first career, but for a lifetime of reinvention and growth. And as part of that, people look at micro-credentials and stackable kinds of credentials as opposed to just degrees or certifications, because the grain size of what you're learning often needs to be small enough that you're not going to need to go back to the school for another graduate degree or for some kind of a new credential if the opportunity is to learn something that's more focused. Silver lining for learning was mentioned in the introduction. I don't have time to talk about that, but it's a repository of really interesting things happening around the world in terms of learning technologies. Four of us started Silver Lining for Learning in March 2020, the week that the pandemic shut everything down. We said, we'll do this for 5 or 10 weeks till the pandemic is over. Every Saturday for an hour, we'll find something interesting and discuss it. Well, the pandemic wasn't over in 10 weeks, and by the time it did recede, we were about 150 episodes in and having a great time and finding a lot of interesting things. So we've kept going. We just did episode 255. It's a very interesting repository in terms of things going on. Another thing that I'll draw on in looking at these new models of lifelong learning is work of this National AI Institute on Adult Learning and Online Education, for which I am the Associate Director for Research. And as this overview indicates, the Institute has spent now in its 5th year developing different kinds of AI-powered assistants. Some are directly assisting learners in learning. Some are instead helping teachers of adults to be more effective in their work. And on the front end, AI is making the learning experiences much richer and much more active. And on the back end, the AI is able, especially because of the ability to analyze natural language, to find richer patterns that help us understand from the process data what people have mastered, where they need help, why they need help, and then those feedback loops take place. I'll give a couple examples later in the talk. If you're interested in the idea of how do you scale something like a next generation model for lifelong learning, this article came out a couple years ago It looks at massive learning 2.0, but not at MOOCs 2.0. MOOCs were a misstep in terms of massive learning, but now, in part because of MOOCs, in part because of the pandemic, in part because of advances in XR, immersive learning, and AI, we have the opportunity to put a next generation model together. That's part of what I'm talking about today. And there's more detail in this article. So the big first part of this, the big headline that I want to convey is we're going to be living in a time of incredible disruption. We need to graduate students who are well prepared to be leaders, to thrive on chaos, to be heroes that can carry us forward through these different kinds of threats. But it's not just students that we graduate, it's each of us having to reinvent ourselves often, having to prepare for jobs that don't yet exist, having to think about cross-career. What are the skills that we have that are the most valuable? And to illustrate these very general statements, I want to talk about specifically GenAI and its role within this idea of a new model of lifelong learning, continuous progression of lifelong learning. And in particular, I want to talk about IA, intelligence augmentation. So IA is when a human being and an AI partner work together effectively with each doing what it does well, so that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And the idea that you're working in partnership with a machine is nothing new. Economists call that the division of labor, and it's been changing for centuries. But with generative AI, what we're seeing is that a very wide range of professions and roles is now moving into a stage where people will have AI partners as in their work. So AI may replace a small number of jobs, but its bigger impact will be this kind of IA partnership. And you can see in the left-hand column the kinds of professions and jobs that were thought of before GenAI as being pretty much immune from this kind of change. And now that's no longer the case. So how does this partnership work? Well, intelligence involves complementary roles of judgment and reckoning. Reckoning is what AI does well. Judgment is what human beings do well. And to give a direct example, let's look at healthcare workers who deal with people who have cancer, oncologists, and similar roles. Those people now increasingly have AI partners, and the partner does something that no human being can do. It does calculative prediction, reckoning, where every morning it looks at 1,500 medical journals online to see if something new has appeared that might affect the treatment of a particular patient. And it looks at online medical records from similar patients all across the world to see if something new has occurred that might guide the treatment of the particular patient. And it passes that information along to the human beings that are working with the cancer patient. But you would never want the AI to work with the cancer patient directly, because while it may understand a lot of things about the disease and about treatment options and so on, it doesn't have the kind of practical wisdom, the judgment that human beings have. AI doesn't understand pain and death. It doesn't understand that some people want quality of life and others want quantity of life. That there are personal beliefs that people have about death, cultural norms that shape issues about dying, spiritual beliefs, and that what treatment you choose may have dramatic impacts on your family circumstances, including the economics of your family life. So those are all things that are on the human side. And where this works well is if the AI develops more and more sophisticated predictions that then human beings can use in their practical wisdom of giving advice. So what that says in terms of education is that if machines are providing reckoning, we don't want to focus on human beings doing calculative prediction. They're not going to be as good as AI at doing that. But what we do need to do is focus on preparing human beings more for judgment and for working with AI in a way that they're the decision maker and that they use AI as a way of helping them make better decisions. An example that comes out of the work of the institute that I'm part of is how IA works with teachers of adults. So as a teacher of adults, I'm increasingly going to be surrounded by different kinds of AI assistants. Tutors that can help when students are falling behind and you need to move on with the rest of the class, but you need to find a way to keep them up. Question answering teaching assistants that, as you know, students constantly are bombarding you with questions. If they only read the instructions, the questions would be answered, but people don't read the instructions. And so having a question answering assistant becomes a very valuable asset. Laboratory assistants, library assistants. There's even a social assistant that my institute has developed that in a large online classes help people find learning partners that might be good complements for them in terms of their learning. And I can either be de-skilled by all these assistants, sitting at the center of them, having them take over parts of my job. If I want to just read the newspaper or focus on going to more faculty meetings or something, the situation isn't really improved. It just is a shift in the division of labor. But if I upskill, if I take advantage of the fact that some of the more routine and low-level parts of the job are now being done by AI, and I can go more deeply into my individual students' cultural backgrounds and their aspirational goals and the kinds of things that they bring to the table from what they've experienced in their lives so far, I can personalize their learning in a very powerful way. So the real gain in IA is not that AI is so wonderful and intelligent, but that it can help human beings to become more wonderful and intelligent. But only if people upskill, only if people not only upskill, but they upskill in ways that help them increase their judgment, their practical wisdom, and that don't help them necessarily get better at reckoning. So how are we doing with this? How well are we teaching right now to help with IA? Well, the answer is, unfortunately, that we're doing quite poorly. And by we, I mean not only K-12 education across the world and university education across the world, I mean elite universities like Harvard are, in a way, using AI to go faster in the wrong direction. Because what we judge the quality of our education by is high stakes tests, high stakes psychometric tests. So to get into an elite university, you want to do really well on the SAT or the Gaokao or some other kind of high stakes measure. When you graduate from your university, you want to do well on the law school admissions test or the med school admissions test or other kinds of tests that employers might use in order to determine whether or not they want to hire you. And all of those psychometric tests are reckoning. AI can do well on those tests without understanding a single thing that it's asked because they're reckoning-based tests. So we're building an educational system that increases students' reckoning just when that's no longer the most important thing for them to have in work. So while we talk a lot about how AI can change the nature of teaching, we really need to think about how AI changes outcomes, the outcomes we desire from education. One of the things that keeps me up at night is that 95% of what I read about AI in education is basically about doing things better. You need a lesson plan, AI can help you write your lesson plan. You want to turn a reading into a podcast, AI can do that for you. You want to take your syllabus and turn it into PowerPoints, AI can do that for you. It's automating the conventional ways of doing things in an obsolete industrial era educational system that isn't preparing people for the kind of lifelong learning that they need in order to come through successfully in this period in history. And what we need instead to be doing with AI and learning is to do better things, not doing things better, but do better things. And what I'm going to describe next is some of the kinds of better things to illustrate that we could be doing with AI that would speak to this issue of how we can prepare people for lifelong learning. So we don't have time in this webinar to reflect, but you'll have access to the PowerPoint. And some of the reflecting that you might do would be to look at your own teaching or your own experience as a student and ask about the balance between reckoning and judgment. And should that be changing at this point in history because of what people need to have as their skill set when they graduate and what they need to have as their beliefs and their dispositions and their ability to be self-directed, because that's what's ultimately what's going to make them successful in lifelong learning and in thriving on chaos. If you want to know more about intelligence augmentation, this is a report that I co-authored that's just available on the web that goes into this philosopher that developed a whole framework for AIA. And what I'm going to talk about next is another report that I co-authored that says, okay, if we want to prepare people for judgment, how do we do that? How do we actually move away from reckoning and doing well on high stakes tests and focus instead on judgment, on practical wisdom, on thriving on chaos? So a lot of people, including me, are very nervous about using AI in education because it so easily can be misused. And the kind of touchstone that is easy to use in determining whether or not AI is being used well goes back to learning. We ask our students in courses to produce proxies for learning. We say, I've taught you for a semester, now write an essay about this complicated phenomenon, or do a presentation about it, or produce a marketing plan, or produce a work of art, whatever the proxy happens to be. But the learning isn't the proxy. It's the proxy is the destination, but the learning is the journey. So to do an essay, you have to look within yourself to think about what your original ideas are, and then organize them, and then find a way to communicate them to other people that is interesting to them and that conveys your passion and your rationale for why they should be listening to you in your essay. None of those things happen if AI writes the essay and you edit the essay. It's not your own original ideas, it's AI's ideas. You're not organizing your ideas. AI has already done that with somebody else's ideas, and so on. So you never want AI or another person or anything else to do your thinking for you if you're trying to learn something, because you have to take the journey yourself. But it can help you to produce these proxies without doing your thinking for you. And I'll just sketch some examples of this so that you get a feel for what I'm talking about. We'll just be very simplistic and divide learning into three types of learning: acquisition, participation, and knowledge creation. So a lot of learning in school is acquisition. We don't want to reinvent civilization. We want students to build on the foundation of what's already known. So a lot of it is transmitting information into students, helping them make sense of it. AI is used as a tutor frequently when we're doing learning as acquisition. But That's sort of the doing things better. What does the doing better things look like? Well, one of the tools that this National AI Institute I'm part of has developed is called SMART. And SMART is a tool that helps learners deepen their concept learning. So let's say that you've asked your students to do an essay on something or a presentation, some other kind of demonstration of what they know. And they've started work on that, and they got to a point where they feel that they put down what they know and they want some feedback on it. They can turn to SMART. SMART hasn't prepared what they're presenting. They're taking the journey, but SMART gives them feedback on where they are on the journey. So it might say, well, there's 6 dimensions to this phenomenon, and you've only got 4 here. Here are the 2 that are missing. Or maybe it says, well, you've got all 6, but 2 and 4 are interrelated, and you need to talk about that. And here's where you should look in order to prepare to do that. So it's the kind of formative feedback that ideally an instructor would give if instructors had the bandwidth, which of course we don't, especially in large classes. And then when students are done, when SMART has helped them to get as far as they can, then the human being comes in and gives the kind of feedback that SMART can't give, like saying, well, you've got an essay here and you seem to have the major points that it should have, but it's incredibly dull and nobody is going to want to read this. So let's talk about ways that you can make it more engaging and interesting for others. One of the groups that I've been working with to understand how to use AI for acquisition learning is a group out of Dubai called the Digital School. It's funded as part of a global initiative, and it is active now in about 15 different countries. They've been able to spread very rapidly. One of their latest initiatives is Skill Ed, which is helping young people to find their entry-level jobs in Africa. And I've worked with them to create a different podcast series than Silver Lining for Learning, a podcast series called Digital Education Dialogues. And the full first year of Digital Education Dialogues, which you can find online in any, any kind of service where you find podcasts, is AI. How do you use AI to help marginalized students with assimilative learning? But learning is also participation, and this is where all the emphasis on AI tutors, in my opinion, comes up short, because you don't want to lock yourself in a room and only interact with an AI as a way of learning. You're graduating into a workplace and a world where teams are going to be what makes sense out of these very complex situations that nobody has seen before. There's no historical precedent for how to deal with them. And so you have to learn how to participate as a team. And some of that, of course, is intellectual, but some of that is just learning how to play nice with other people and how to make a good contribution to the team as a whole. AI can do some very interesting things there along the doing better things dimension, not just automating the current kind of collaborative learning, but doing better things. What you're seeing is a screenshot from one of my colleagues at Harvard, Professor Nicole Mills, who teaches learning French, introductory French, and she teaches it by having you imagine that you're in Paris. Because languages, we know, are not just substituting one set of words for another. Languages are richly shaped by culture and context. They're ways of thinking. So I and a variety of other people helped her to create a virtual world, a virtual Paris. This is in a surrealist museum that is in real Paris, in the Centre Pompidou. But what we've done is to create a murder mystery. So someone has been murdered in the Surrealist Museum. You are a French detective, and you show up and start to interview the subjects to determine who may have committed the murder. And from Nicole's perspective about learning French, this is something that requires a lot of the use of the subjunctive clause in the French language. So she's giving her students a chance to practice their subjunctive clause from the students' point of view, they're having a wonderful time being detectives and solving this murder mystery. And of course, the subjects are played by chatbots. There's a lot of things that AI can't do very well as a tutor that I don't have time to get into in this talk. But AI is perfectly capable of playing a narrow role like a murder suspect or a landlord or somebody else that you're negotiating with. And something that, again, that I'm doing that builds on this idea of collaborative learning is working with a team of volunteers to build curricula for teaching negotiation to people that have been marginalized, to people that can't afford to take a negotiation course at an expensive university. And a big challenge in teaching people to negotiate is giving them the chance to practice in an authentic way. They can practice with other students, but students don't know how to play a landlord or a used car dealer or somebody else that you might be negotiating with, your boss looking for a raise. And so again, we're developing AI chatbots that can do a good job of playing those narrow roles, that can enable that kind of practice. That's another example of doing better things. The third bucket of learning, again, in this very simplistic way of describing it, is learning as knowledge creation. You're not just assimilating, you're not just working with others to understand something that's too complicated for any individual to understand by himself or herself. You're adding to the knowledge that's part of society. And too little of our education is focused on knowledge creation because we're oriented around these high stakes tests. And those tests are all about the knowledge we already have, the knowledge that AI has been trained on, not about the new knowledge that is vital for us to progress and for AI to progress. Again, I'll use an example from the institute that I'm part of. Vera is an AI assistant that helps people who are learning to simulate. So you're using inquiry to try to understand ecosystem science. You're doing a series of simulations to try to model what's happening in a real ecosystem, just as an ecosystem scientist would. And the AI, again, is not doing the modeling for you. It's not doing the simulations for you, but it's watching the sequence of simulations and it's giving you feedback. So it might say, well, you're doing a good job of including all the dimensions that should be there, but every simulation you're changing more than one variable. So you have no way of knowing cause and effect because you're not controlling the variables properly. And again, this can be used to provide students feedback while they're taking the journey towards fully understanding inquiry learning, modeling, and simulation. And then the human instructor can come in and go beyond what Vera can do in terms of providing a richer set of feedback. So why is knowledge creation so important? Why am I stressing this as something that's missing that we really need? The author William Shakespeare once said, "The moon is a thief. She steals her light from the sun." And moonlight is in fact reflected light from the sun. The moon doesn't generate light, it reflects light. And moonlight is wonderful and romantic and all those other things, but it's not powerful. It's not powerful enough to do photosynthesis. It's not powerful enough to drive the water cycle. We would, the whole world would collapse if we had to rely on moonlight. Well, AI is like the moon. AI is not generating knowledge. AI is reflecting back knowledge that it's been trained on. And it's human knowledge, the knowledge that is trained, that's the sunlight. And now we're diluting our sunlight because we're dumping all of this AI products into the World Wide Web and back into the training sets. So we're diluting the human sunlight, which is genuinely creative, with all this AI moonlight, which is derivative. And we need to reverse that process and prepare a generation of human beings and help ourselves as human beings in the middle of our journey in order to create more knowledge effectively. And all this requires being self-directed. In other words, this is not saying, well, gee, you'd better save a lot of money because every 5 years you're going to need to go back to school and learn something. Nobody's going to be able to do that. Instead, what we need to do is take the modeling that happens from academic work, if it's work along the dimensions of this kind of preparing people to thrive on chaos, to take that modeling and internalize it to the point that you're capable on your own of finding what to learn and understanding how to learn it and using AI as a helper in learning it, as well as other people, in order to be self-directed and move forward. I'm an advisor to this group called the Post-Secondary Teaching with Technology Collaborative. They've developed frameworks for how to inculcate self-directed learning into students. They have research-based recommendations of things that institutions can do to help build this kind of self-directed capacity into the kind of learning that students are doing anyway as part of their courses. And again, I'm putting this into the slide deck in the hopes that you'll look at it later, and if you're interested, that you'll go and look at the primary resource itself. Again, we don't have time within this limited framework to, in the webinar, to reflect, but afterwards, if you're interested, you can think about your own curriculum, your own teaching practices, and how much you have a balance between acquisition, participation, and knowledge creation. Now, there's no right answer to what the balance should be because it depends on what you're teaching and who you're teaching and how you teach and what kinds of outcomes you want to have. But if overall across courses, students are not getting much that helps them to become knowledge creators, that is not a good thing. Not at this point in history with everything that we need. And also you can ask, to what extent is my teaching personalized? Do I have ways that I can understand the needs and strengths of each student if I use AI to take over parts of my job, not to do them better than I could do them, but to free me up to do something better that AI cannot do? So I'll close because I want to have time for your questions and comments and discussion with another metaphor. This is actually a classical metaphor going back thousands of years. The Greeks, goddess of wisdom, the maiden goddess of wisdom, always is portrayed with an owl on her shoulder, Athena. And when the Romans conquered the Greeks, they changed the name of the goddess to Minerva, but they kept the owl. So there's this idea going way back in history that to be wise, you have this kind of animal sidekick. And it's never quite explained what the role of that animal sidekick is. But I think it's a very interesting metaphor for thinking about AI now. That AI in IA relationships is like the owl sitting on our shoulders. We're not sitting on the owl's shoulders. We're not, turning decision making and knowledge creation over to AI. It's not capable of doing that. But what we can do is ask ourselves how we and our sidekick together can increase our wisdom. So, after only 53 years of my career, I decided to create a professional website, and that website is a big repository. It has keynote talks like this, it has blogs, it has scholarly articles, it has all sorts of resources that I've created primarily in the last decade and interwoven together all under one tent. So if you're intrigued by some of the things that I talked about and you'd like to know more about them, I hope that you'll go and take a look at the website. And I want to thank you again for having me share ideas, and I look forward to hearing what you would like to discuss now.
Okay, let me open my mic. Thank you very much, Professor Dede, for these thought-provoking ideas and for drawing this big picture about where education is heading and what people should be reflecting on, especially teachers and academic leaders. We have one question so far, and let me grab it. Yeah, the question, Dr. Dede, was by one of the audience, Anis, I guess, or Ali, sorry. He was wondering whether the rapid pace of AI development would make us question and start to question whether human-like cognition is truly impossible to replicate. You brought the analogy of the moon and the sun, and that the moon is just reflecting the light from the sun, and that AI is just regenerating knowledge that we have created, and we should be focusing as humans on generating knowledge. And he's just doubting whether, with this fast development in AI, whether human-like cognition is still impossible for AI to generate. Any comments?
Well, if you look on the professional website that I ended with, you will find numerous talks that I've given that centered on what AI can and can't do. I didn't do that for this talk, but I've written and discussed numerous things that generative AI can and cannot do. And the simple way to say this is that the big AI companies are lying to you. They're saying we're right on the bridge of artificial general intelligence, which is Hollywood AI, the AI where AI is like a human being. And we're not. And in fact, with a large language model, which is the breakthrough that GenAI rests on, you can't get to artificial general intelligence from that. I remember when I first found out that dogs could sing, I was really excited. Wow, I didn't think dogs could sing. And I went to YouTube and saw these videos, and it was amazing. Dogs were singing. But then I realized that dogs can't sing very well by human standards. And you could give me $1 trillion in 10 years, and dogs still wouldn't be able to sing very well. They're structurally not possible for dogs to emulate the kinds of sounds that humans make. It's structurally not possible for a large language model that's based intrinsically on hallucinating and reflecting back its training set to get to artificial general intelligence. There'll have to be some other kind of breakthrough. Maybe at some point in the future that'll happen. I doubt it will be in my lifetime. Maybe it'll be in your lifetime, but it's not where we are right now. And so understanding the limits of Gen AI and not letting it take the journey for us is a really important thing, even though a lot of the advice that we're getting from the companies that are building this and selling it is directly opposite to that.
Thank you, Chris. Another question is by Deep. He's asking how to convince a student not to rely fully on AI while the main concern of him or her is to get the degree regardless of skills.
So I think a couple of illustrative stories can help convince students of this. These are true stories. In the halls a couple months ago, I bumped into one of my colleagues, and the colleague had an internship available in their research team. And so they publicized the internship, and about 200 people applied for this single position, which is characteristic of life these days. And they were stunned to find that 195 of the letters were very similar to one another. What had happened is that 195 of the students had dumped everything they knew about the job description into GenAI and told it to write the letter. And of course, it wrote the same letter. for all of them because it didn't understand who they were. It was just reflecting back out of its database what the job description referred to. So one thing for sure is none of those 195 people got the job because they weren't making their own case about themselves and their capabilities. They were letting GenAI do their thinking for them. And similarly, you know, when you get to work in the future and you have a job interviews anymore are not the employer looking at your transcript and looking at your recommendations. Wow, you have a recommendation for Chris Dede at Harvard. I think I'll hire you. No, employers are smarter than that. They give you a task to do. So if you want a job as a marketer, they'll give you a stack of material and say, spend an hour, give me a marketing plan. Go. And of course, students who've used GenAI in school will just dump the materials into GenAI and say, give me the marketing plan, and they'll go back and give it to the employer. But the employer is smart too. They're going to dump the same materials into GenAI. And if your marketing plan isn't a lot better than what GenAI can give them, you're not going to get hired. Why would they hire you? So I think using those kinds of simple but true illustrations with students can help them to understand that the GenAI is the floor. It's not the ceiling. And if they can't get above the floor, they're not going to have a very happy life, no matter what degree they have with their name after it.
Thank you, Chris. We have received lots of questions, and honestly, what I have done is to use AI to summarize these questions into a few points. I'm just being cautious of your time and the time of the audience because we need to finish at 6:30. So based on what the AI tool that I'm using generated, and please forgive me if that tool, so it's easy to blame the tool now, I'm still responsible for that. Yes, I understand that I can use the tool, but I'm responsible for the output. But I hope you understand the time limitation we have. So one of the question is, is automation the same as AI? And how should AI be meaningfully incorporated into learning beyond traditional automation tools?
So this gets back into the distinction I made between doing things better and doing better things. Not just with AI, but the entire history of educational technology has basically been about taking whatever kind of instruction was going on and automating it. So whether you look at smartboards or whether you look at tutoring systems or whether you look at other kinds of AI that has gotten promoted within schools, lesson planners, and so on. It's all automation, but it's automation of the old model. And as I'm indicating, what we need is to do better things. That's where the big win is. The idea that you can learn negotiation now by getting extensive authentic practice with a coach that provides feedback, not possible before GenAI. The idea that you can get formative feedback on something that you're developing without trying to get an instructor to do it that has 300 other students in their class, not possible before GenAI. So I'm not saying that you never want to automate something, because if it's the best way of doing what you need to do, fine, go ahead and automate it. It makes sense to me. But I'm saying that automatically automating, which is what tends to happen with ed tech, is the wrong way to think about it.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I might be selfish here. I've got a question that I'd like to show, or a comment to share with you. I'll come back to the questions very quickly. And then this question or comment is based on my experience, my previous experience working at another university where I was supposed to support faculty integrate these core competencies in the curriculum, such as creativity, resilience, ethics, problem solving, communication, teamwork. And the pushback I used to receive from faculty is that we were not trained to teach these skills. We are not a technical vocational institution. we are here to generate knowledge and disseminate knowledge to the students. I'm sure you have heard something like that. So I just wonder if you can
I
share
hear it all the
comments
time.
about the role of the
I hear it all the
university.
time.
Yeah, the role
Well,
of the
I
university
think,
in making future-ready graduates.
all right. So I think if the first thing is that a really good university, and I'm saying this about elite universities as well, a really good university is student-centered. It's not centered on the curriculum. It's not centered on the teaching strategies that people use. It's centered on the students who are the customer, and it's centered on the kind of empowerment that they want to have when they graduate, empowerment in work, but also empowerment in life. And the idea that what you do is you say, well, no matter who you are, what we're going to do is we're going to teach you engineering, or we're going to teach you marketing, or we're going to teach you, you know, French classical literature is a perversion of that. That's not what students are paying for. And that's why I think declaring a passion rather than declaring a major is a powerful way of thinking about reimagining what we're doing. Because if a student comes and says, yes, I want to know engineering, but I want to work in the developing world and I want to be able to help marginalized groups with the kind of engineering that's meaningful for them, well, then you're not going to do the standard engineering curriculum and no electives because what you teach is engineering. So, it's if we want to be true professionals, we have to be client-centered. True physicians are client-centered. True attorneys are client-centered. True accountants are client-centered. And we can't just get away with saying, well, we weren't trained to do that. And, I'm going to just teach how I was taught and what I was taught. Not good enough. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. So we have only 1 minute left, so we might finish with this question. And apologies to the audience if, and actually we couldn't cover all the questions. The question here is asking whether there is an AI integration framework that university can adopt, like an institutional framework that universities should adopt to scale AI-powered initiatives across all colleges.
Well, it's hard to give an answer to that in 1 minute. But if you look on my professional website, you'll find keynote speeches where I talk about AI literacy. And I'll just give the very short version of that. Let's go back to looking at reading and writing and literacy in terms of the written word, which is something that the civilization went through centuries ago. And what the written word created was doing better things. It enabled people not to simply rely on memory, but to be able to have libraries and to be able to have schooling. So there was a whole series of socio-technical inventions that came out of the technical capability of being able to write and being able to read. And the real definition of writing literacy isn't just reading and writing. It's understanding the nature of the book and so on. Well, the real definition of AI integration is to say, how does GenAI change what books are? How does it change what courses are? How does it change what degrees are? How do we reinvent the university and lifelong learning based in AI? And a quick thought experiment is to imagine that you're head of a space colony and you're starting a civilization on another planet. Would you really begin by duplicating universities or duplicating secondary schools? I sure hope not. At this point in history, we can do so much better. And let's start that process of reinvention.
Okay, with this, we'd like to thank you, Professor Dede, for this thought-provoking session and for guiding us through these important ideas on lifelong learning, intelligence augmentation. Sorry?
If you allow me, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, Dr. Muhammad.
So thank you so much, Professor Dede. As Director of the Digital Learning Office, I would like to thank you on behalf of the office and Qatar University for accepting our invitation and for your insightful presentation. I totally agree with you on the points that AI is not there to replace us. As AI is adopting AI. In adopting AI, we have to focus on doing better things rather than the things that we are currently utilizing generative AI for in teaching and learning. And this actually takes me to one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but if there is no time, then we leave it for the email communications later on, maybe. It's been over 50 years that the community is working on utilizing intelligent tutors and AI into providing personalized and adaptive learning. And what I believe is what we have up till or until today is more of a theoretical frameworks, or maybe some trials here and there. And I wanted to hear from you where we are in this direction. I mean, are we really going to have a proper utilization of AI to provide adaptive, personalized learning that gonna in somehow equip our students with the skills for the future jobs, and also enrich our learning practices rather than just adopt AI in generating learning outcomes and material. Thank you so much again, and
Yeah, I'll give just a very, very quick response, and that is to say that AI tutors can do useful things in providing foundational knowledge, but anything that AI can teach, AI will be doing in the workplace. In fact, it's easier to build an AI to do that thing in the workplace than it is to build an AI to teach it. So if you stop education with what AI can teach, if you say now my education system is a bunch of AI tutors and students will graduate and they'll know an awful lot, well, what they'll know is not going to get them employed because they're on the reckoning side. They're not on the judgment side. So again, more stuff on the website. Thank you for inviting me, and it's an exciting time. I hope that some of you will join this process of reinvention.